7 true disturbing end-of-school year horror stories. Hey, welcome back. If this is your first time here, what I do on this channel is collect and share true horror stories, real experiences submitted by real people who needed someone to tell them. Tonight, I want to talk about something that should feel familiar, comfortable even, the end of the school year, last days of class, cleaning out lockers, graduation parties, senior trips, that long, relieved exhale before summer finally starts. For most people, it's one of the best feelings in the world, a finish line you've been running towards since September. But for the 7 people in tonight's video, those final days of school brought something else entirely, something they weren't expecting, something that, in some cases, followed them long after the summer ended. Their names have been changed at their request. Some identifying details have been adjusted, but what happened to them, that's exactly as they described it to me. 7 stories, all true, all disturbing. Let's get into it. Story 1. The Last One Out. Tyler was a 17-year-old junior at a public high school in rural Ohio, and by his own admission, he was a world-class avoider of things he didn't want to deal with. He paid attention in class, he handed things in, mostly, but cleaning out his locker, that was a bridge he had been refusing to cross since October. By the second to last week of May, that locker had become what his friend Kevin generously called a biological hazard zone. There were gym clothes in there from the first week of the fall semester, permission slips for field trips that had already happened and been forgotten, 3 textbooks that technically still belonged to the school district, a water bottle he was afraid to open, and somewhere in the very back, buried under everything else, a gym shirt he'd stopped acknowledging entirely. His mom had left voicemails about it. His homeroom teacher had put his name on the clean-out list 3 Fridays in a row. The school had sent home a written reminder with a deadline. Tyler had successfully avoided all of it, until the second to last day of school, when there were no more reasonable excuses left. Tyler had already bolted, something involving a girl from their AP History class, because there was always something involving a girl from AP History when Kevin disappeared early. Tyler was handling this alone. He texted his mom he'd be home by 5, figured it would take 20 minutes, and got to his locker around 3:15 with a garbage bag and a plan. The building was emptying fast. The end of the school year had a specific rhythm to it. Students gone within 10 minutes of the bell, teachers locked up and heading out 5 minutes after that, the hallways going from wall-to-wall noise to absolute quiet in under half an hour. By 3:25, Tyler's wing was completely empty. Just him, the buzz of the overhead fluorescent lights, and the increasingly strong smell of industrial floor cleaner as the custodial crew worked their way through the building. Mr. Donaldson came by at around 3:40. He was the head custodian, a big, quiet man who'd worked at that school for close to 30 years. He had a way of materializing in empty hallways without making any sound, which Tyler had always found vaguely unsettling. He asked Tyler if he'd be out by 4. Last sweep of the building at that time, he said. Tyler said, yes, sir, definitely. He'd be out well before that. Donaldson gave a single nod and moved on without another word. Tyler put his earbuds in, started his playlist, started actually making progress. It was a meditative way in a weird way, throwing things out, sorting, finding objects he'd written off as gone. He found the phone charger he'd accused his little brother of stealing and quietly decided he'd never bring it up. He found a birthday card a friend had slipped in his locker back in October that had never been opened. He found the gym shirt and threw it in the garbage bag without any further investigation, which was the right call. He could feel the end of this in sight. He pulled one earbud out to check the clock at the far end of the hallway. 3:51. Almost done. That's when he heard it. It came from the direction of the gym wing, the older section of the building, connected to the main hallway through a long, narrow corridor that always smelled faintly of mildew and old wood, no matter how recently it had been cleaned. The hallway with the flickering lights that had been on the maintenance list since October and never fixed. The sound was heavy and slow, a scraping, dragging sound on linoleum, the kind you'd associate with something substantial being moved, but there were deliberate pauses between each movement. Drag, pause, drag, pause. Tyler looked toward the gym wing corridor. The lights down there were doing their usual flicker, casting the hallway in alternating light and shadow. He could see the full length of it. Empty. He watched for a moment,
The sound continued, then stopped. He told himself it was a custodian moving a cart. Equipment, supplies, the most logical explanation. He went back to the locker. But that silence that followed bothered him more than the sound itself. Tyler specifically described this to me when he shared his story. He said it wasn't the dragging that got to him. It was the way the sound stopped. Not like something had moved away, fading as the distance grew. It stopped clean, like a decision. Tyler zipped the backpack fast, grabbed the garbage bag, started toward the main exit. He had to pass the boys' bathroom near the front of the building. The door was cracked open a few inches. Completely normal, it was almost always left cracked. He walked past it and slowed. He could hear breathing from inside. Not labored, not rushed, slow and even and purposeful. The breathing of someone who had been perfectly still for a long time and was exercising deliberate patience. The breathing of someone who was exactly where they had decided to be, doing exactly what they had come to do. Someone was 5 feet from Tyler in that building, and they never needed him to know it.
Story 2. Trail's End. This story was submitted to me by a girl I'm going to call Becca. She was 18 at the time, had just wrapped up junior year and was about to start her senior year at a school in the Pacific Northwest. She was the planner of her friend group, the organizer, the one who made spreadsheets when everyone else was still half asleep on the idea. So when the school year ended and she proposed a 2-night camping trip to celebrate, it was already understood that Becca would be the one to actually make it happen. The group was 4 people: Becca, her best friend Dana, and 2 guys they'd known since 7th grade named Cole and Jared. They'd camped together twice before and had a good dynamic. 2 tents, no drama. Everyone knew what they were there for. Becca had reserved a designated site in a stretch of national forest about 40 miles from their city, backed against a ridge with a lake visible through the trees. No cell service out there. That was the entire point. A clean break before senior year started, before college applications, before any of it began. They drove up Friday afternoon, right after the last bell of the year. The road got narrower as they climbed, pine trees pressing in on both sides, the GPS finally giving up and going silent. They checked in at the Forest Service gate, got their permit from the ranger on duty, who reminded them to store food in bear canisters, said enjoy yourselves, waved them through, and found their site by late afternoon. It was a good site, private, backed up against the east tree line, clear view to the lake downhill, fire ring already in place. They set up both tents, got the fire going, spent Friday evening exactly as planned, cooking over the flame, talking about the year they'd just finished, laughing about teachers they'd never have to sit in front of again. Becca felt genuinely happy. It was everything she'd wanted it to be. Nothing happened Friday night. Saturday morning, Cole woke up first. He always did. He was one of those people who was alert and functional before 7 a.m. without apparent effort, which everyone else found mildly irritating. He unzipped the tent at around 6:45, stepped outside intending to start the fire for coffee. He almost stepped on them before he noticed. Footprints. Human footprints, pressed into the soft dirt around both tents. Adult-sized. They started at the tree line on the east side of the campsite, arced around both tents in a slow, deliberate loop, and returned to the trees. The spacing of the prints was careful, slightly toe-heavy, the kind of distribution you see when someone is walking slowly and trying not to put their full weight down, trying not to make noise. Cole went inside and woke up Jared without speaking, brought him outside. They stood together looking at the prints, then followed them to the tree line, where the trail disappeared into dry pine needles. Cole looked into the trees. Nothing moved. No sound beyond the wind working through the upper branches. They made a silent, mutual decision not to tell the girls yet. There was a reasonable explanation, had to be. Another camper wandering near their site, a park ranger doing early rounds, something normal. They had a good Saturday, hiked down to the lake, swam, made lunch, and stayed out until the lights started going golden through the trees. The footprints stayed in the back of Cole's mind the entire day like a splinter he couldn't reach. That night, around midnight, Dana woke up needing to use the outhouse. It was 60 yards up the trail. She'd made this exact walk the night before without a second thought. She grabbed her flashlight, unzipped the tent quietly, and started up the path. She made it about 40 yards before she stopped. Someone was standing at the tree line.
right at the very edge of the forest where the trees ended and the clearing began, far enough away that her flashlight beam didn't quite reach them, leaving the figure in that particular kind of shadow that exists just beyond light. Not moving, not making any sound, the right height and shape to be a person, standing completely still, facing in the direction of the tents. Dana stood there for what she described as approximately 5 seconds. She and the figure were motionless. The flashlight beam stayed aimed at the ground in front of her. Then she turned around and walked back to the tent, not running, because something instinctive stopped her, and woke up Becca. Becca woke up the guys. Cole grabbed his flashlight and his pocket knife and went to the tree line. He swept the beam back and forth, called out asking if anyone was there, said they didn't want any trouble. Wind, branches, nothing else. The figure was gone. They talked about packing up and leaving. It was 12:30 in the morning. The road was long and dark, and there had been drinks around the fire. They decided to stay, but put all 4 sleeping bags into one tent, Cole at the entrance with the knife. Sunday morning, more footprints. Different this time. These started at the tree line on the north side of the campsite, crossed the entire clearing, went around both tents and exited into the trees on the south side. A full circuit. But near the tent they'd all slept in together, the prints weren't a single pass. They overlapped. Multiple circuits around that specific tent. The dirt turned up and churned from repetition. Whoever was out there had stood in that clearing and circled their tent over and over. They packed up and drove home without finishing breakfast. An hour down the mountain, Becca said something into the silence of the car that made everyone's stomach drop. She said that she'd posted about the camping trip on her Instagram story the week before. Nothing specific, just a photo of the reservation confirmation with a caption about being excited for the trip. She'd gotten a DM from an account she didn't recognize. That looks like an amazing spot. She'd ignored it. She'd also gotten a new follower around that same time, a private account, no real name, a landscape as the profile picture. She'd clicked on it for 2 seconds and moved on. Both accounts were gone now, deleted while they were out of cell range. No record, no trace, no way to know who was behind them. Dana told me the story years later. She said the thing she still thinks about, the image that hasn't faded, isn't the figure at the tree line. It's the overlapping footprints around that tent. Because you walk around something once when you're curious about it. You walk around it again and again when you're making up your mind.
Story 3. Wrong Proctor. This story came to me from a girl I'll call Nadia. She was 17, a senior at a suburban high school outside Atlanta, Georgia. Straight-A student, top of her class, early acceptance to a university in the Northeast already locked in by January. By the last week of May, she was operating on senior autopilot, showing up for the formality of final exams, going through the motions, already mentally halfway through her summer. She had nothing left to lose and no reason to be on edge. That particular Thursday morning, she had her AP Literature final at 9 a.m. She arrived at room 214 at 8:55, with her pencils, her ID, and a water bottle. She'd reviewed her notes over breakfast more out of habit than necessity. She was ready to sit down, finish the exam, and officially close out her high school career. She found her seat in the 3rd row. The room was filling up with other seniors, maybe 17 students total. Normal. She settled in, set out her materials, and glanced toward the front of the room. She didn't recognize the proctor. That wasn't unusual by itself. AP exams were always run by outside staff, teachers whose own students weren't taking that particular test, or substitutes brought in specifically for finals week. Nadia knew most of the faculty by sight after 4 years, but there were occasional outside subs she wouldn't know. She assumed that's what this was. He was middle-aged, average height, unremarkable in every visible way. Khaki pants, a dark polo shirt. He was wearing a district lanyard, the standard red and white one issued to all staff, but the badge on it was turned face down, the photo and name resting against his chest instead of facing outward. Nadia noticed the badge, thought about it for half a second, moved on. The exam started on time. He distributed booklets, gave the standard instructions, no phones, raise your hand if you need paper,
110 minutes beginning now, and sat down at the desk at the front of the room. Then he didn't touch his phone. That was the first thing that felt slightly wrong, in the way that small things do when they break a pattern you've come to rely on. Every proctor Nadia had ever had pulled out their phone the moment students started writing. It was practically tradition. You suffer through the exam while the adult in charge scrolls through whatever app they're currently addicted to. This man didn't do that. He sat with both hands flat on the desk in front of him, and he watched the room. Not the way a proctor watches for cheating, quickly scanning, looking at papers. He watched faces. His gaze moved from student to student, slowly and methodically, like he was doing an inventory. The kind of looking you do when you're memorizing something. Nadia focused on her exam. About 40 minutes in, she looked up to collect her thoughts between paragraphs. The man was looking directly at her. She looked back down. About a minute later, she looked up again. He was still watching her. This time, when their eyes met, he held it for 2 full seconds before shifting his gaze to the student beside her. She finished the exam in just under 2 hours. She was one of the first to turn in her booklet. He accepted it without speaking. She gathered her bag and walked to the door. Before she stepped out into the hallway, she glanced back over her shoulder. He was watching her leave. She mentioned it to a friend in the hallway who told her to stop being paranoid. She went home and tried to do the same. She mostly succeeded. Around 3 that afternoon, a text came in from a classmate named Portia, who'd been in the same exam. Portia had gone to the front office to ask a question about her booklet and mentioned the proctor from room 214, described him. The woman at the desk had gone quiet. The assigned proctor for room 214 that morning was Mrs. Keller, a retired teacher who did periodic substitute work for the district. But Mrs. Keller had called in sick that morning, and no replacement had been arranged by the office. Room 214 should have been unproctored. Students should have been moved or the exam rescheduled. Nobody had authorized a replacement. The school pulled the visitor sign-in log for that morning. There was an entry for room 214, a name written in handwriting so cramped and illegible that nobody at the front desk had looked at it twice. The guard at the entrance confirmed a man had come in around 8:30, said he was there for the AP finals, said the room number. He had a lanyard. He knew the specific room. That had been sufficient. Security footage from the entrance camera showed a man matching Nadia's description entering through the front doors at 8:38 a.m. He'd signed in at an angle to the desk that partially blocked the camera above him. The footage was inconclusive for any kind of facial identification. All phones had been collected from students at the start of the exam, as was standard procedure. No student had gotten a photo. He had been alone in a closed room with 17 students for nearly 2 hours. The district filed a report. An investigation was opened. Nothing came of it. No identification was ever made. The case was referred to local police, who listed it as an unauthorized access incident. It was followed up twice before going cold. Nadia told me the thing she still goes back to, even years later, is the badge. Because subs sometimes forgot their badges or wore the wrong lanyard. Honest mistakes. But this man had his badge. He was wearing it on the correct lanyard. He'd simply turned it around. He'd thought, in advance, before he walked in, about the possibility that someone might try to read it. He'd prepared for that. He sat at the front of a room and watched the faces of 17 teenagers for 2 hours, and nobody knew who he was.
Story 4. Background. This story was sent to me by a guy I'll call Ethan. He was 18, had just graduated from a high school in a mid-sized city in Colorado. By his own description, he was the kind of student who was involved in everything. Multiple clubs, a couple of sports, one of those people the yearbook staff loved because he appeared in half the photos and kept a running list of events to make sure he didn't miss anything. He had a lot of friends. He knew almost everyone in his grade and most of the grades around his by name and face. That's what made him the one who noticed. Yearbooks came out on the second to last day of school. Distribution day was held in the gym, the usual controlled chaos of 500 students crowding around the table, signing each other's books, taking photos with friends, that specific end-of-year energy that somehow manages to be both exhausting and bittersweet. Ethan picked up his copy, signed a few books, got his signed in return, and took it home that evening to go through it properly. He started from the beginning, the way he always did with yearbooks. Freshman class photos, club pages, sports sections. He was about 35 pages in, somewhere in the fall event photos, when something made him stop and turn back a page. There was a photo from the homecoming dance in October. Big group shot, maybe 25 students in a decorated gym. Facing the camera, everyone posed and smiling. He found himself in the back row, found his friend group in the middle. Normal photo from a normal night. But at the right edge of the frame, near the gym doors, 3 rows back, there was a face he didn't recognize. Not a face he couldn't place. He was good with faces, always had been. This was a face that when he looked at it directly produced a specific feeling he described to me as a kind of wrongness. Everyone else in the photo was turned toward the camera, performing for it. This person was angled slightly away from the camera, looking toward the side of the room, not participating in the photo, just present in the background of it. He told himself it was probably someone from another school who'd come as a date. Entirely plausible. He moved on. About 15 pages later, he stopped again. Winter formal photos from December. Big group shot in the main hallway, decorated with string lights. Ethan was in this one, too. He scanned the photo from left to right, and there, at the far left edge, half in shadow near a row of closed lockers, was the same face. Same person, same slight turned-away posture, same position at the periphery of a crowd, not engaged with anyone around them, not looking at the camera. He went back through the book slowly this time, methodically, page by page, photo by photo. By the time he finished, he had found the same individual in 11 separate photographs. 11 photos taken by different photographers at different events in different locations spanning September through May. The homecoming dance in October, the winter formal in December, a charity fundraiser event held outside in March, the spring art show in April, a senior class trip from the first week of May. 11 photos, 9 months, multiple different locations both inside and outside the school. Always at the edge of the frame, always turned slightly away from the camera, always appearing to watch the crowd rather than participate in it. Ethan showed the photos to his friends the next morning. Nobody recognized the person. Not from their grade, not from the grade below, not from any club or team or activity anyone could think of. He reached out to a few of the yearbook staff members who'd taken the photos. None of them had any memory of the individual, couldn't remember photographing them, couldn't remember seeing them at the events. He pulled up the yearbook's index. Every student who appeared in a captioned photo had their name listed in the back. He cross-referenced every single one of the 11 photos. Not one of the index students matched the person he'd been finding at the edges of frames all night. He brought it to the school. They pulled the original high-resolution image files. They confirmed what Ethan had found. One unidentified individual appearing in 11 photographs across the school year, present at events throughout the calendar year, never directly photographed, never looking at a camera. The school ran the images against their student roster. No match. They checked with the district's substitute staff records. No match. They sent the images to the school resource officer who ran them through whatever databases were available. Nothing. Whoever had been appearing in those photos for 9 months had never officially existed as far as any record was concerned. Ethan told me the thing he keeps coming back to when he's lying awake at night is the math of it. 11 events over 9 months. That's not wandering onto a campus by accident. That's not being in the wrong place. You don't end up in 11 photos at 11 separate school events over 9 months by coincidence. That's a schedule. Someone had been tracking the school's calendar of events, showing up and standing in the crowd with enough familiarity and confidence that no one once asked who they were or why they were there for a full school year, right up until the very last week when the yearbook went to print and took the evidence with it. Ethan still has his yearbook. He said he can't bring himself to throw it away, even though looking at it makes him feel sick, because those photos are the only proof that it happened. And whatever that person was doing at those events, they made absolutely sure no one would notice until it was too late to find them.
Story 5. The Prank. This story was sent to me by a girl I'll call Lena. She was 18, a senior in a small town in the Midwest, and she was part of a group of 5 who decided they wanted to do a senior prank on the last night of the school year. Not a mean prank, not anything destructive or dangerous. The plan was classic, almost wholesome by senior prank standards. Sneak into the school after hours, rearrange the furniture in the teacher's lounge, maybe put plastic wrap over a few doorways, leave a trail of sticky notes with jokes on the principal's door. The kind of prank that ends up being laughed about at graduation rather than landing anyone in serious trouble. They'd even discussed making sure not to damage anything and cleaning up after themselves. There were 5 of them originally: Lena, her boyfriend Owen, their friend Tommy, and 2 others who backed out in the 2 days before. One because their parents had somehow found out and put their foot down hard. The other because of what they described as a bad feeling they couldn't explain. That left 3. Tommy's older brother had graduated from the school 2 years earlier and had kept a copy of the key to the side door of the gym wing. That key had been passed quietly among former students for years, one of those open secrets that every class seemed to know about, the kind that the administration probably suspected existed but had never confirmed. The key still worked. They went in at 11:45 p.m. on the Thursday before the last day of school. Phone flashlights on, moving carefully, whispering when they spoke. The gym wing's side door opened without any protest, and they slipped inside. The school at night was a genuinely unsettling place, even to people who had walked those hallways thousands of times. Everything about it felt slightly wrong in the dark. The corridors looked narrower and longer than they did during the day. The rows of lockers cast long, repetitive shadows. The ceiling seemed higher somehow, the air stale and close. Every sound their shoes made on the linoleum seemed too loud, bounced back at them from walls that should have absorbed it. They kept laughing nervously and immediately shushing each other. They made it to the main hallway without incident. The teacher's lounge was on the 2nd floor, and they were on their way to the stairwell when Tommy stopped and pointed at the door to the basement. The school had a partial basement, not a full subterranean level, but a half level below the main floor used for storage. Metal equipment, decades-old furniture that had been replaced but never disposed of, filing cabinets of archived records, stacks of old yearbooks going back to the 70s. Students weren't technically permitted down there, but the door from the main building was left unlocked during school hours, and, as it turned out, after hours as well. Tommy said they should go down for a minute, just to see if there was anything useful for the prank. He had a vague idea about moving a piece of old furniture to a funny location. Lena said she didn't want to. Owen shrugged and said it was probably fine. Majority won out. They went down. The staircase was narrow, the railing cold under Lena's hand. The basement opened up at the bottom into a low-ceilinged storage space that smelled exactly like you'd expect. Dust, old paper, rubber from forgotten gym equipment, the faint chemical smell of cleaning products stored in book. Metal shelving lined the walls loaded with the accumulated junk of 30-plus years. Cardboard boxes with dates written on them in faded marker. Stacks of folded gym mats, broken chairs, old audio-visual equipment from a different decade. They swept their flashlights around, moving deeper into the space. About 30 feet in, Lena stopped walking. "Something smells different," she said. And it did. Under the dust and the paper and the rubber, there was something else, something warmer and more immediate. The smell of a lived-in space. Not quite body odor, not quite food, something in between. The smell of air being regularly breathed, of body heat in an enclosed area over a period of time. The distinct scent of habitation. Owen moved his flashlight to the right, toward the far corner where the shelving ended and the floor opened up into an unobstructed stretch of concrete. There was a sleeping bag back there, unrolled and laid flat on top of a folded gym mat, a pillow with a clean pillowcase on it. Next to it, a sealed plastic storage bin of the kind people use to keep food away from rodents. A battery-powered camping lantern switched off. A backpack, upright, leaning against the wall. A row of personal items lined up neatly along the baseboard. A water bottle, a book, a folded set of clothes. The 3 of them stood there without speaking for what felt like a very long time. Lena said it first. She said, Someone's been living here. Not had been, was. The sleeping bag wasn't collecting dust the way everything else down there was. The lantern had no film of grime on it. The water bottle was recently used. The book had a bookmark in it, placed with care. None of it had the look of something abandoned. They left immediately. Back up the stairs, back through the main hallway, back out through the gym wing side door, out into the parking lot, and into Tommy's car. No senior prank, no furniture rearrangement. Nobody said anything for the first few minutes of the drive. They called in an anonymous tip the next morning from a payphone at a gas station across town. Lena refused to use any of their personal phones. She said she didn't want whoever was in that basement to know who had called. The school's facilities team went down that afternoon. They confirmed everything the three of them had seen: a sleeping area, a food supply, personal effects, clear evidence of regular occupation. Based on the condition of the space, the facilities director estimated the setup had been there somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks. 4 to 8 weeks. The second semester. The semester when the building was occupied from 7 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. When the custodial crew rode through every floor of that building twice a day, every day. No one was found. Whoever had been living down there had cleared out between the anonymous tip and the investigation, or had been coming and going during hours when the basement was unoccupied and unmonitored. The personal belongings were cataloged and held. No one came to claim them. Lena told me the thing she still thinks about is the book with the bookmark in it, because that bookmark meant they'd been sitting down there reading, calm enough to mark their page, planning to come back and finish it. Living down there quietly, 40 feet below a cafeteria full of students every single day, and never once making themselves known, until 3 seniors with a spare key and a bad idea walked in and turned on their flashlights.
This story was submitted by someone I'll call Paige. She was 18, a senior, and the end of the school year also happened to fall near her birthday, which meant the graduation party her friend Dylan hosted was also kind of a birthday celebration for her. Dylan's parents were out of town for the weekend. Nice house, big backyard, pool, the works. The guest list was about 30 people. Classmates they'd known for years, a few older siblings, the kind of crowd where everyone knows everyone. Clean fun. Everything was perfectly normal for the first 2 hours. The party started at 8, music, people Paige had known since middle school, easy and warm and uncomplicated. By 9:30, the backyard was full, the pool was open, the night was going exactly as expected. Around 10, a man Paige didn't recognize walked in through the side gate. He was older than most people there, not drastically, maybe early 20s, she thought. He came through the gate the way someone does when they know the layout of a place, moving with a familiarity that wasn't loud, but wasn't hesitant either. He found the drink table without looking for it. He found a natural place to stand and hold a cup. He started talking to people. The people around him talked back. Paige started asking around. She asked Dylan who he was. Dylan said he assumed he was someone Kyle had brought. Kyle said he thought the guy came with Paige's friends. She worked her way through 5 or 6 more people over the next 20 minutes. Every single person pointed in a different direction. Every single person assumed he'd come with someone else. Nobody had invited him. She kept her eye on him for the rest of the night. Not openly, she wasn't trying to make a scene, and she was still telling herself there was probably a simple explanation. Maybe he lived nearby and someone had just mentioned the party in passing. It happened. But she noticed the way he moved through the crowd, comfortable, unhurried, talking to enough people to look like he belonged there, but not quite landing in any one conversation long enough to be remembered by it. He was performing presence without being present. He was good at it. Around midnight, people started noticing things going missing. A phone someone had left on the table by the grill, a wallet set down near the pool for about 3 minutes, a set of car keys that had been on the counter inside. At first, the general assumption was the chaos of a crowded party.
Things get moved, things get knocked under chairs, happens all the time. But when 3 separate items were gone and everyone was comparing notes and coming up empty, Paige looked around the yard. The man she'd been watching was gone. The side gate was standing open, moving lightly in the breeze. The wallet was found 2 days later, emptied in a dumpster 2 streets away. The phone was GPS tracked to an intersection 3 miles from the house and then went offline. The car keys were never recovered, though the car itself was found parked 3 blocks away, undamaged but moved. The police report was filed. The detective assigned asked for photos or video from the party. There were plenty. 30 people with phones means documentation of nearly every hour of the night. The detective went through it all. The man appeared in several videos and photos, always at the edge of the frame, almost always with his face partially turned away or obscured by the angle. He seemed, Paige said, to have an awareness of where cameras were pointed even in a casual party setting. In one video, taken at around 10:30, the camera swings briefly toward the back of the yard and catches him clearly for about 2.5 seconds. He's standing near the fence alone, not talking to anyone, holding his cup. But his eyes are completely still and they're not on the party. They're moving from face to face among the guests, the same slow, methodical scanning that Nadia had described from her exam proctor, taking inventory. The detective ran the image through available databases. No match. But the thing that Paige called me specifically to share, the thing she said bothered her more than anything that was stolen, was from a friend of hers who talked to the man that night. Her friend said he'd been perfectly pleasant, normal conversation. But at one point, he'd asked where she lived. She'd told him, gave the neighborhood, said it was nearby. He'd said it sounded like a nice area. She hadn't thought anything of it. He'd also asked, casually, whether she was doing anything fun over the summer. She'd mentioned she and her parents were going on vacation the following week, named the city. He'd nodded, smiled, moved on. She'd answered everything without hesitating because the questions sounded like small talk, the kind of questions everyone asks at a party. Paige told me that's the part she replays, not the stolen items, not the open gate, the ease of it. The way he'd stood in a backyard full of 18-year-olds and asked casual questions that sounded like nothing and gathered information that amounted to something. He'd been there for 4 hours. He'd talked to a lot of people, and every single one of them had assumed someone else had invited him.
Story 7. The Application. This last story was sent to me by a girl I'll call Cassie. She was 17, a senior at a high school in a small city in the Northeast, and she was going into the end of the year with a problem she'd been quietly stressing over since March. She had not gotten into any of the 3 universities she'd applied to early decision, and her backup options were schools she wasn't excited about. She wasn't in crisis. She knew she'd figure it out, but she was stressed, the way seniors are when they feel like everyone around them has their next chapter figured out and they don't. So, in early May, when she saw a flyer on the school's community bulletin board advertising a summer research scholarship for graduating seniors, she paid attention. The program was described as a 6-week paid research internship with a nonprofit educational foundation designed for students interested in social sciences and education policy. The scholarship included a stipend, academic mentorship, and a letter of recommendation from the program director, which, for a student still building her college application narrative, was genuinely appealing. The flyer said applications were open to students from their district specifically, which made it feel local and accessible rather than out of reach. She took a photo of the flyer and filled out the online application form that evening. 3 days later, she got an email from a man she'll describe as Mr. Harfield, listing his title as program director. The email said she'd been selected for a preliminary interview and asked if she'd be available the following Tuesday at 4 p.m. The interview would be held at a conference room in an office building in the downtown area, about 20 minutes from the school. Cassie confirmed the appointment. She mentioned it to her parents, who were generally supportive. She mentioned it to her school counselor, who said it sounded promising and that she should absolutely follow up. Nobody raised a red flag. A scholarship program with an interview, that was normal. That was how these things worked. She showed up at the office building that Tuesday at 3:55. It was a legitimate building. Shared office space, multiple tenants listed in the lobby directory, a receptionist at the front desk who directed her to a second-floor conference room without any hesitation. Mr. Harfield was already there when she arrived. He was a man in his 40s, she estimated, professional-looking, well-dressed. He shook her hand, offered her a water bottle, gestured to a chair across the table from him. The room looked like a real conference room. A table, chairs, a whiteboard, generic corporate art on the walls. The interview started normally. He asked about her academic interests, her goals, why she was interested in educational policy. Cassie answered carefully, the way you do in an interview when you're trying to make a good impression. He seemed engaged. He took notes. But around 20 minutes in, the questions changed. They became more personal, more specific. He asked about her family's background, what her parents did for work, whether she lived with both parents. He asked which neighborhood she lived in, and when she named it, he said he was familiar with that area and asked which street. She answered without thinking. She answered because the conversation had been flowing normally up to that point, and the shift had been gradual enough that she didn't catch it until she was already in the middle of answering. By the time she was walking back to her car, she felt deeply, inexplicably wrong. She couldn't point to a single thing he'd said that was overtly threatening, but the cumulative picture of what he'd asked, her schedule, whether she was home alone, her exact street, sat in her chest like something cold. She called her mom from the parking lot. Then she called the school. The school counselor looked up the program the next morning. The organization named on the flyer had a website, but it was thin. Generic text, no real contact information beyond a form, no verifiable staff names, no social media presence beyond a single dormant account created 2 months earlier. She called the phone number listed on the website. It rang 6 times and went to a voicemail that never been set up. The counselor contacted the district office. A staff member checked the community bulletin board records. Postings were supposed to be approved before being put up with documentation from the organization. There was no approval record for that flyer. No one in the office had reviewed or authorized it. It had been put up without going through any official channel. The office building where the interview had been held was contacted. The conference room on the second floor was available for hourly rental by anyone with a credit card and a reservation. No ID required beyond what was provided at booking. The name the room had been booked under, when the front desk eventually checked, was not connected to any real business or organization. A report was filed. The detective who handled it noted that the flyer had been specifically targeted at students from Cassie's district, and that the pattern of questions in the interview was consistent with someone attempting to gather personal information about a minor's home address, daily movements, and periods of isolation. When the detective pulled the bulletin board for other flyers, they found a second one. Different program name, different framing. This one advertised a paid tutoring position. Same general format. Posted 4 weeks earlier. They tracked down 2 other students who had applied. Both had gone to interviews at different locations, also in rented conference rooms. Both reported the same pattern of questions. One of those students had given her address. 3 students, 3 separate fake programs, all targeting seniors from the same school in the final month of the year, all designed to look exactly like the kind of opportunity an anxious senior would reach for. Cassie told me the thing that keeps her up at night is the flyer itself. Because it wasn't posted online where anyone could find it. It was posted physically, on her school's bulletin board, in a building that required you to sign in at the front desk. Whoever put it up had walked into her school, had been inside her school, and knew that the end of the year was the right time to do it, because that's when seniors are most anxious, most eager, most willing to respond to something that looks like a door opening. He knew that. He'd planned for it. And Cassie was not the first. Those are 7 stories. 7 different people. 7 different situations, all connected by the same window of time. And the thing I keep coming back to when I sit with all of them together is how ordinary the context was. A kid staying late to clean his locker. A camping trip to celebrate the end of the year. A routine exam. A graduation party.
Things that happen every May for millions of people without incident. The ordinariness is the whole point. These people weren't in obviously dangerous situations. They weren't doing anything reckless. They were just living through the end of a school year, and something found them anyway. If you have your own story, something that happened to you, something you've never fully been able to explain, send it to me. The link is in the description. I read everything. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.